So thanks for coming and participating in this alumni panel about sustainability kind of career paths and just life paths. My name's Daniela. I use she and they pronouns, and I'm the sustainability coordinator at UW Green Bay. So the reason I wanted to put this on is because when I was an undergrad studying environmental science and studies, trying to figure out what my path was going to be, I attended an alumni panel and really found it valuable hearing directly from folks who had gone through similar programs, who are out in the working world and various careers, and just getting their input and advice and trying to figure out what resonated with me. So I'm hoping that we can kind of have a nice conversation and that our alumni can share the wealth of their experiences with our current students. And so this will also be recorded and made available through Handshake, which is kind of a student portal for internships and jobs, and through the Career Services YouTube. So folks will hopefully be able to watch this as well after the fact. So I'm gonna allow each of you to kind of introduce yourselves briefly, name, pronouns, what major or concentration option, depending on when you were at UWGB, and then kind of maybe just a little one sentence or something about kind of your sustainability trajectory path, maybe where you're at right now, or a key feature that you might want to share. And then we'll get into some questions and dig a little deeper. So I'm gonna go with the first person at the top of my screen, which is Jim, if you want to introduce yourself, and then I'll pass it around to folks.
My name is Jim Lax, pronouns he, him, his. I received my environmental science degree at UW Green Bay, majoring, well, actually, with the concentration was ecosystems analysis, and the option was physics. A big part of the physics was meteorology. I managed to carve out some courses. It was very flexible at that time. I got my master's degree from Ohio State University, and during my graduate work, I actually had the opportunity to work in Antarctica. When I applied for graduate school, I had at first enrolled with the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I worked for the professor who wrote the book on Antarctic meteorology. So that's how I got that opportunity. I went on to work for 31 years for the state of Michigan in air pollution control, and I'm currently doing some volunteer advising to the city of Grand Rapids regarding greenhouse gas emissions.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Neil.
Hi, I'm Neil Wechsler. I was at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay from 1971 to 74. I started college at the University of Washington here in Seattle, but I didn't like it and I dropped out. And then I found real purpose in learning about what they were starting up in Green Bay at that time. And I just loved my 3 years there. I did go to graduate school at the University of Georgia and then at the University of Illinois after that. And I did it because we didn't have the word sustainability, but I was looking for something. And at the university, we talked more about environmental problem solving. And so that's what I was looking for, was a career in environmental problem solving. I loved being a scientist. My concentration was also ecosystems analysis. My option was biology. I took a lot of botany courses in particular, but I did take zoology classes as well. And Then, but I ended up in the bicycle business, and for over 40 years, I ran a couple of bicycle stores, and now I've retired from that, and I'm working in consulting for young bicycle dealers learning the business. And I chose that just because I believe it's just really excellent for clean transportation, and it is an environmental, problem solver.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. I think Dan's having some sound issues, so I'm going to keep working with him. But Brent, if you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Brent Dubois graduated in 2005. He, him, his. My major at the time was business administration. Got my Bachelor of Science degree in that. My minors were in marketing and econ. And kind of my path, or maybe my biggest claim to fame in the environmental business, is when BP had the Macondo spill. I was very, very involved in response to that. Several of the ships that cut and capped the well and did some of the other things like that as related to finally mitigating that spill were, I guess, my responsibility at that point in time. So while I was not one of the engineers doing it, I was on the business side, dealing with BP, dealing with the Coast Guard, and everybody else who was involved. So that was a lot of fun, and just highlights to me the need for sustainability and environmental solutions. So now I own a business in Green Bay that focuses on providing solutions to businesses who are trying to follow an environmentally sustainable path, which is not always easy for them to then find the outlets that they need in order to do that. So our business concentrates on kind of connecting those dots.
Awesome. Glad to have you here. Marissa, how about you?
Hi, my name is Marissa Michalkiewicz. My pronouns are he, she, and her. My mistake. I went to GB from the fall of 2012 and graduated May of 2016. My educational path is a long one, but ultimately I have a bachelor's of business administration, so double emphasis in finance and management. I always tell people that's my employable degree. And then I double minored in environmental science and environmental policy and planning, which are my fun aspects. And then I have a certificate, and I always have to read it, but I have a certificate in environmental sustainability and business from the Environmental Management and Business Institute, otherwise known as MB. And that's actually one of the big reasons why I went to Green Bay, other than playing softball for 2 seasons. I stuck around for the schooling aspect because I was a big old nerd. And now, after hopping around for a little bit, I am the Recycling and Solid Waste Program Coordinator for Outagamie County Recycling and Solid Waste. Brent just mentioned about finding those outlets for disposal of products, and I'm that end result sometimes. So my job is kind of cool. I get to do some elements of our landfill operations. Some days I'm doing our recycling side, other days I'm working in our resource recovery park. But the reason everyone knows what I do at Outagamie County is because I handle our social media. So I oversee our viral TikTok sensation. And I'm notable for turning our employees into characters. So it's really fun. My whole mantra is to make environmentalism entertaining. So we get more of that broader audience to pay attention. And then when I leave work, I also started a company called Give a Damn Ventures, because I think more dams need to be given. And I am currently using that company to introduce affordable and energy efficient housing. And actually this week we're insulating our first property on Webster Avenue, really close to St. Vincent and Bellin Hospital. So I stay relatively busy, but the field of sustainability is very, very important to me. So that's my spiel.
Awesome. Perfect timing. Dan, you're able to join us. And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, hi, Dan Heim, he, him. I got my start in sustainability probably age 10, 1960, 61, thereabouts. I had an uncle who worked as an engineer at Fort Howard Paper Company. And he knew I was interested in electrical toys and motors and things like that, but we were a blue collar family and we were continuously running low on batteries, and I had to wait to payday to get more batteries. So he shows up one day with something called a solar cell in a little plastic box with a couple of wires on it. He explained to me that this could do the same thing as a battery. All it needs is sunlight. And it was a totally amazing concept to me at the time, because but I hooked it up to a small 1.5 volt DC motor, took it out in the sun, watched the motor start to spin, and boom, I was hooked on solar energy right there. It's been a long path from there to where I'm at now, but the house I've got out here in the desert has a 3.5 kilowatt solar array on the roof. For somebody who was amazed by a single solar cell, but that's where I'm at right now. And in the intervening years, I've taught informally and formally in the classroom about sustainability. It's easy to do when you're teaching science, which is what I did all my career.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So I want to give our guest the opportunity to introduce themselves, either aloud or in the chat, just so that we can kind of try and speak to some of your interests. If you want to share your major, any particular career paths you might be thinking about, or just general interests, you're welcome to put that in the chat, or again, come off mute. Hopefully we can have a conversation. Feel free to speak up or put things in the chat anytime. So I just want to put that invitation out there. But I'm going to start in with a couple questions. I think y'all did a great job kind of giving that broad overview of your paths and experiences. So I'm curious if there are, specific skills or kind of experiences, competencies that you think are really important for the kinds of work that you have done or are doing that you'd recommend folks pursue. And feel free to chime in, whoever wants to take a crack at that first.
Well, I've been in retail for a very long time, and it's so, the kind of competencies that are valuable in the work that I do are not anything specifically to do with sustainability. Sustainability is such a broad ranging thing. It gets into everything we do. Every choice we make affects sustainability. So the kind of things that I think of when I think of what competencies are important or what skills are important just have to do with how do you do a job, coming from a background in science and 10 years in science before going into business. But it's all, the big skill that makes so much difference is communication, being able to understand other people, have other people understand you, and so that you can accomplish what you want with them. Since I only worked by myself for 1 year in my bike store, it's been mostly run by my employees, and so learning to talk to people and learning to train people is just a big thing about listening, and that's if you want to get to if you want to accomplish anything, you have to be able to work together. So I don't know where I'm going, but somebody else.
I agree with that. One of the things that they don't teach in college is, which is a basic skill, is working with people. That's something that you learn more on the job more than anything else. The courses lay the groundwork for the career, but once you get more involved with dealing with individuals and working with people is a good competency to have.
I think the 2 cents that I would add to that is that on any environmental project, you have to be able to balance multiple different aspects, right? There's obviously the environmental aspect of how does it work? Why does it work? Why is it good for the environment? But then there's always a financial aspect to everything that you do. So you have to be able to apply it to the business, understand the true cost of making that change, maybe what it means to the end user, what it means to the taxpayer, things like that. And then there's always a perceptional viewpoint that goes along with that. So, there are certain things that some people consider to be sustainable, like waste energy, that other people don't view to be as sustainable. So I think one of the things it's very good to walk away from a 4-year degree like UWGB with is that you have an opportunity to kind of get a good solid background in all of those different areas. And if you're truly going to pursue making change in a sustainable way, at some point you're going to have to address every one of those legs of the stool in order to move a project forward.
So really that interdisciplinarity being key. Cool.
Jump on and wrap this one up, but I would say one of the biggest skills and maybe characteristics to have too in the field of sustainability would be to be willing to kind of go with the flow. Sustainability, at least in my realm of it with waste, things are always changing all the time. And if you get too stuck in one mindset, there's a chance you'll miss an opportunity to branch into something new or find a better solution to be more efficient at a project. So I think that's one of the best parts about being in a sustainable industry, is to kind of get that opportunity to be flexible and be a little more open-minded to creative solutions. So I don't know how one goes about teaching that, but just having that skill set in the back of your head to always be willing to consider alternate options.
Wonderful. Dan, did you want to add anything to that, or I can ask another question?
There, unmuted again. Yeah, communication skills, obviously, in the classroom, you don't really get taught communication skills in college. It's something you develop just by interacting with people. But the only way I could really sustainability is during the last 10 years or so, when I was teaching here in Phoenix and building the home that I retired in, we would have my physics students come up like on a field trip. They had to provide their own transportation, but the parents were happy to come along, and I'd give them a tour of the house to show them about things like earth sheltering, thermal mass, reflective roofs, solar energy. And the hit of the tour, of course, was hot dogs made in a solar cooker, which was waiting for them at the end of the tour. And I did that for 10 years for 150 students a year. And that was probably my biggest impact in terms of sustainability. Many of those students stayed in touch. Some of them copied my ideas and built homes designed to be low in energy use and small carbon footprint in terms of construction materials. So that was probably my largest career impact towards pushing for sustainability.
So I also think it's important to get a sense of like what different types of work are like if folks are interested in different kind of career paths. So are there things that you really love or loved about a particular role that you had, particular project? And what were some of the challenging, less fun parts? And how do you balance those?
I'll start out by pointing out my teaching career started at a diocesan school, St. Mary Springs, in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. From there, I went to Bayport High School in Swamico just outside of Green Bay, which was a public school with a pretty rough and tumble student body. From there, I ended up at Brophy College Prep in Phoenix, which is a private Jesuit school. And after that, which I thought I was retiring from, I got connected with a charter school here in northern Scottsdale. And so I have really seen all four modes of education. Probably the most challenging, and I didn't expect it to be, was teaching at the private Jesuit school. These were students from entitled families, and they had a lot more than the students I taught in any of the other schools. And that was a unique challenge as a teacher, because although I didn't really have discipline problems, I had self-esteem problems, and the students had self-esteem problems, a lot of which were foisted on them by their parents, who were definitely overachievers. So it was a unique aspect of teaching that I wasn't prepared for, and one can hardly prepare for in college. It's just something you got to kind of learn to deal with on the job. I did have a mentor, a teacher of mine from high school that I've stayed in contact with all my life. He taught senior English, and I often went back to him for advice about how to handle things in the classroom. And a mentoring program is pretty good to get involved with, whether you're on the mentor or mentee end. And that was an interesting aspect of my career that I didn't anticipate.
Others, best parts, challenging parts of your jobs or projects?
Well, the best part for me is, fixing things for people, getting things running that aren't working. The best parts are just the relationships that you're able to build in a repair business or in selling bicycles, but getting people into something new or used or whatever, but the people really appreciate it and it's just fun. And it usually goes well. It was a great career. The hard parts would be staffing problems, especially if you're not good at hiring, interviewing, and you're learning your way and you hire people that don't share in the mission of the business. And then, it can be very difficult, and you really, there's a lot to learn there. And hopefully eventually you learn it, or you learn it early on, but there's there's difficult things every day, but mostly, if you're providing a service that you feel is constructive and they appreciate it, then you love your work.
In a small business, you have to be your own HR department. That's got to be tough.
Especially when you just have no idea, the bike shop I worked at when I was in graduate school, I was the first employee there. So it wasn't like I had great ideas about the bicycles and bike fitting and bike repair, but as far as like how to help employees, do a great job and enjoy their career, it was all learning on the job for me. But it doesn't have to be. There's lots of resources to learn, other ways.
So I would say for me, the biggest part of my job, I consider myself to be a builder. That's what I like to do. I like to make things, create things. So I've had opportunities throughout my career where we've built multiple different process plants, installed pieces of machinery that are then, they exist for much longer than I was with the company that I was with, or even some of the stuff that we recently installed at my current company. I expect that stays there and operational and provides those services well beyond my time here. So that's the fun part for me, is when you get to create something and you can look at it and say, I built that building and I put the stuff that's inside of it. And as a result of that, we recycle X amount of thousands of pounds of copper. Marissa probably remembers, we figured out we recycled enough copper to run a pipeline from New Orleans to Seattle and back one year, something like that. So that was cool because we, we built that, and that will stand for much longer than my career. The hard part that I think the part that gave me the most anxiety is a lot of times the things I did have to do with landfills. And for most people, a landfill is a dirty word, even though it's kind of a necessary part of what we do. And it doesn't matter, I think, what you do with a landfill, whether you're trying to make it better or whatever, it automatically gets met with a certain feedback. So I can remember times trying to explain and really re-explain why I thought something was really a very good thing for the community, even though it was related to a landfill, and having a public perception that I was very much off my rocker with that, and standing for 7 hours one night, answering community questions over and over and over and over again about a specific process for some recycling that we were trying to do at a landfill. That kind of stuff gets hard because, as I said, you have to balance every leg of that stool sometimes in order to put a project forward. And it would have been very disappointing to see that project fail because we weren't able to balance that piece of it, the communication piece of it.
Like, I'm just gonna chase Brent this entire panel here, but for the record, what's kind of cool is my first adult job. I worked for Brent. Brent was my CEO. I worked for I was his permit coordinator. First gig out of college, so we were in the waste energy business doing some cool stuff. And then I guess I just kept chasing landfills. So it's kind of strange how that works. But it's I'll kind of jump in what Neil said too, because I would say the hardest part, my career path has been, it makes a lot of sense to me, but to other people, they think I'm a little gypsy, which I am and I'm not. But the hardest part for sure, starting a business, especially one that's, I'm doing mine through a pandemic, through record inflation, record construction costs. So it really chose a good time to build a property. But the hardest part whenever you do anything different, obviously, is to always remember why you started something. And that gets hard when you feel like everything's falling apart at once. But just sticking to that gut feeling that you are doing something that'll benefit in the long run, whether you're building something or implementing policy that's going to impact generations for generations and generations to come. So I'd say that's for sure the hardest part. But I like to think I'm really early in my career too. I'm only 28, but I'd say I'm in a good spot now. So this is the fun stuff where, other than my business, which ultimately is a dream gig for me, but the position I hold at the county could have been written exactly how I wanted to have a career one day, getting to bounce around and do all sorts of fun stuff. So just always kind of following your passions. It makes work go by a lot easier, a lot more enjoyably. So my takeaway lesson is to always pursue something that you genuinely are passionate about. And you can just tell those who are super passionate about their field, and it holds a lot of weight.
Well, my career trajectory in sustainability essentially started on the least sustainable continent on Earth, in Antarctica, where
Looks like Jim froze there.
Poor Jim.
At least it's a good picture of him. If he was going to freeze, it's at least not in a awkward position.
There you go.
Just looks like he's zoning out.
Well, hopefully he'll be able to unfreeze, either leave and rejoin. Stan's been doing, but
When I
until-
freeze, it seems like if I click stop video and then come
Oh,
back in it,
there you are. You want to continue?
now he's muted. You're muted, Jim.
There we go.
I think I'm out now. Okay. And it was a good opportunity. It was a very unique experience. And like I said, it's the least sustainable place on Earth. And then I went on to work in Antarctic meteorology and glaciology. But after I received my master's, I figured that there are very few places in the world that you can actually do that kind of work. So I switched to air pollution meteorology. I worked for the state of Michigan, and doing air permits, working with air permits, and doing environmental impact statements. We did get some opportunities to work on interstate pollutant transport with the state of Wisconsin and other Midwestern states. So it was challenging getting the group together, but eventually we did, and we were successful in reducing pollutants over the Midwest. And my trajectory now is kind of narrowed, where I do volunteer work with the city of Grand Rapids, advising them on their carbon footprint and renewable energy and that kind of thing. But the concern that you have is that when a city is setting goals, can you actually meet those goals that are off into the future, 10, 20 years from now? That's the challenge that we face.
So following up on everything you've shared, I'm curious for folks maybe trying to figure out whether a similar path is right for them. Do you have recommendations for folks trying to answer that question for themselves? Are there things that, qualities that, passions that really help in the kind of career that you've chosen? And kind of the next step is any advice for somebody that decides, yes, this is what I want to pursue. Are there certain experiences, classes, skills that they should develop to succeed?
Well, if we're speaking to a lot of students, I thought the most helpful thing for me personally, not classes are great and all, but it's really beneficial to sit in a job experience too. I did 3 independent studies when I was in college, and I'm pretty sure I had 4 or 5 different internships. So I found those to be the most beneficial. You kind of get to sample the career field before you decide you want to lock yourself into it after college. So I'm a huge advocate for real work experience and those internships, independent studies, whatever those look like.
And I'll plug, I do sustainability internships, and I know lots of other folks on campus that do. So I encourage students to reach out and chat with me and explore those opportunities. So I'll just plug that here.
I can agree completely with Marissa on that from the opposite perspective, which is I was a long time in academics and I did great. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot, but I didn't really find a lot of opportunities to work in the science fields that I was in which was ecology, botany, and plant pathology. And I think that would have been really helpful for me to do so. And I think that, looking for every opportunity to actually get a job doing something where you're going to learn about it. And I think that as far as just the part about finding your passion, yeah, I think that is really important, is to find your purpose. It's the way I would put it, of what it is you want to make your life worthwhile by, and then explore where your talents are, and don't feel like you have to find it all at once, but try different things, experiment with it. But it's something that if you can do that with internships, that's a wonderful way to do it. But it's, the people who are going to be really successful are the ones who find their purpose and then find it a talent, the talents that they have correspond with that, and then they can really thrive.
Dan,
Unmute.
go.
Thank you. I would spend a fair amount of time at the end of the school year on one special class day when we just talked before graduation. And I would tell my students that the key to success, the key to happiness is to find something that you really enjoy doing and then find a way to get paid doing that. And in my case, I loved teaching so much. It was almost not like work. And I would always point out to my students that when I drove into work every morning, looking at the faces of other drivers on their morning commute, very few were smiling, but I almost always was. And that kind of got through to them about the important things when you're selecting your career path.
Yeah, I just also as a counterpoint to that, it is, from a business perspective, I see quite a few people get into the bicycle business because they love bicycles so much. And it's not enough by itself. A lot of those people, they get into it and they just lose money, or it's a second career and then they just drain their savings in the process. So, finding what you love, but also have the talent for is like really got to be combined.
Well, one thing that I found just recently is that more and more state and local governments are looking for people to work in the field of sustainability. It's becoming more common, and I would recommend to students consider that. And the one good thing about a lot of these government positions is that they provide training so that you don't have to know everything just walking in there. They will train you, and some of them do provide internships as well.
Do you want to add anything, or?
I think the only thing I would say is in one of my tech groups, we talk frequently about the definition of success, kind of like what Dan said, right? Be excited to go to work and be excited to go home. And if you can achieve those two things, then you've gotten there. As it relates to picking your career and sustainability, I think one of the things that I stress or try to stress to people is that there's a lot of information out there about a lot of different careers, and there's usually people like this that are willing to answer those questions if you reach out and ask them. And so the best thing to do in order to be in a position where you're excited to go to work and excited to go home is to make sure that you're well informed, eyes wide open as you're going into it, because there's inherent truths to every job. And if you're aware of those before you suddenly have it, it's a lot easier to not be surprised. An example that I like to give: when my younger sister was graduating, she knew she wanted to do things with kids, and she couldn't decide if she wanted to be a teacher or a pediatric nurse. And we sat down, we had a long conversation about at that time the employment market in Green Bay. If she wanted to be a teacher, she was not going to find a job in Green Bay. She was going to end up in Milwaukee or Madison or Chicago or something like that. But she would have her summers off and her holidays off and things like this. But she was going to move, and she's kind of a homebody, and she didn't really want to be that far away from the family. So that was a big deal for her. So she ultimately decided to become a nurse, because at that time in Green Bay, you could get a job pretty much overnight if you were a qualified nurse. And so she was going to have to work nights, and she was going to have to work holidays and do all those things, but she didn't have to move. And I think that there's truths like that that exist for any career path that you want to follow, particularly in sustainability. If you want to work in the sciences, you're not going to be able to do that in certain communities. If you want to work like Marissa does at the landfill and be directly involved in different things, those opportunities and locations for those opportunities are different then. And so kind of deciding what you want to do, and then really knowing what's going to exist for opportunities for you when you graduate are really important. It's going to allow you to get to where Dan said he was a lot faster.
Well, I should, if I may, am I muted? No, I'm good. All right. It's not like teaching was all fun and games. The one thing I was not prepared for, and this is something that could be shared with students at UWGB that are becoming certified to teach, especially at the secondary level. I had no comprehension of how much work needed to be brought home from the classroom every day. Grading papers and doing lesson plans was way more paperwork than I anticipated when I chose that career. Looking back on it, I'm still glad I spent my career as a teacher. But that's such your job you brought home with you necessarily when you're teaching.
I really appreciate all the advice you all just gave. I'm going to share one thing as well from the chat. Brittany shared from the perspective of a student that works full-time. Sit-ins are extremely helpful. So shadowing for a day, that kind of thing is really valuable. And to Brent's point, there are lots of alumni. There are lots of people out there who are willing to talk if you reach out. And so I've talked to many students that share just there's lots of information about how to do an informational interview and really just have a conversation with somebody to understand the ins and outs better. So kind of wanting to start shifting towards like dreaming big and thinking about, to Brent's point, some jobs aren't really present in certain areas, or I'm kind of curious for your thoughts on how do we continue developing a more sustainable future and developing things that maybe don't exist yet. For instance, my job, sustainability coordinator, there are lots of jobs in higher ed now with the title that I have and the type of role that I have, but it didn't exist, in the 70s, I don't think, at least not in this form for sure. So, so any advice, just career-wise, but also just kind of life-wise, how can we continue in whichever avenues, personal, professional life, kind of creating the world we want to see?
Well, you might not, you might know what your career is, but you might not necessarily know what your path is. I was always interested in meteorology, but if you were to tell me that I'd end up in Antarctica and I'd be working in Michigan, you know what you want to do, but you don't necessarily know your path, and it doesn't have to be that you absolutely have to know your destination. You'll find it on the way, basically.
I'll jump in. I think, especially if we want to continue to have a more sustainable future, one of the things I would always recommend is when someone with a sustainability background or interest in environmentalism in one way or another, once those individuals get into a place of not necessarily power, but a place where you can hire people or create internships, things of that nature, where you can inspire the next wave of employees who might be interested in sustainability, to always do it. Even though my business is far from being established in the sense of hiring staff, but I've had 4 interns so far who received credit to work like right next to me doing the things that I was doing to grow the business, and brought them to sites with me, had them sit on meetings, and they knew what they were getting into, but just to be able to show them like, hey, you might not think it's possible, and we're creating these as we go, but being able to bring someone with you, I think that's a huge advantage and a big way we can continue the inspiration for sustainability, is bringing that next generation of people with you.
I think that when for a student, it's really valuable to just learn as much as you can about as broad a range of things as you can. So like Daniela had asked ahead of time questions just to prepare, like what courses were most valuable to you that you took at college, and then what ones do you wish you took? And definitely, I really focused on my interests at the time. But now what do I wish I took? I wish I took more history. I wish I took accounting. I wish I took political science. Sustainability is not about any one thing. It's about what does society do? What choices do we make? It's just a really broad range of things. Green Bay, the University of Wisconsin Green Bay at the time had a real focus on interdisciplinary learning. And it may still now, I just don't, I'm not there now, and I think that was very helpful to me in general. So I think like really learning broadly, and then the learning opportunities just go on. There is so much out there that as much as you have time just to keep educating yourself, and then you'll find those opportunities of ways to contribute as you learn.
I think that's a great point. Thank you, Neil.
Welcome.
If anyone else wants to jump on that kind of question of, were there classes or experiences you'd recommend or wish you had taken or gotten a part of, or, thinking beyond the classroom after college, are there ways that you recommend to kind of keep pushing your learning and understanding? Are there certain professional development type opportunities that might be key for kind of your area or more generally?
Definitely. I've been writing my weekly blog, Skylights, for 10 years now, and that comes out every week. And I'm taking questions from readers. I never have enough subscribers, no blogger does, but I answer questions from readers that require me to delve back into my meteorology books or my astronomy books, all of which are here on my shelves yet, or online, and answer these questions. A lot of them these days, a lot of the questions are about sustainability, a lot of questions about climate change, a lot of questions about global warming and what people can do. And so I educate myself, and I educate a small cadre of subscribers on the latest in sustainability. And Daniela shared my blog there. Feel free to take a look at it sometime when you have a little time to spare.
Links in the chat.
Sure.
Other folks. And also want to open it up again for questions. Brittany, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask any specific panelists or the group as a whole, you are welcome to ask away. I think the last question that I'll ask, and feel free to revisit some of my previous questions about, continuing to push for a sustainable future or advice that you might have. But how do you sustain yourself in this work and not burn out? I know that there's a lot of passion, and sometimes that can be challenging. Any tips?
Well, I had no trouble sustaining myself in the work. I fought off retirement because I like it so much, really. And so that's why, even though I sold my store, I went into consulting for other stores. And I don't know, as far as sort of wrapping up a little bit, even though it's not a question directly that was asked, I just want to express an opinion about sustainability is that it's a choice. We can, as a society and as a world, we can choose to make it a sustainable situation we're in. If you take like the amount of, we're not going to get something for nothing. We have to make compromises. We have to give something to get something. And then, the thing we have to choose is to drastically reduce our consumption. And that's not easy to do, but look at the compromises, the things people gave up to fight the pandemic. It was a threat to everybody, but the degree of threat from the pandemic, while it was huge and terrible what happened to people, the threat from climate change and environmental degradation is so much greater yet. And yet there's, just people have to be willing to make even bigger changes in their lives. All of us do, to really make a future for our children and our grandchildren and the generations ahead of them, after them.
I appreciate that. And I'll chime in too, because I think about this a lot, that it's really important, I think, to focus on kind of the possibilities and not just the sacrifices, but also, that a future can be even better than we might imagine. And so I'll recommend, there's a book series called Emergent Strategy. One of the books is called Emergent Strategy, and then there are two others that are that came along with that. And I think that it's a really beautiful group of books that kind of speak to some of those ideas of possibilities and kind of different ways of thinking about the world. So highly recommend it. But other folks,
Yeah.
And yeah,
Well, Danielle,
any other thing?
I certainly agree. We have to look at the positive side, and I can't help but say that's why I like the bicycle business so much, is because, we're doing things to make the world a better place when we ride a bicycle instead of drive a car, but we also make our lives better, not worse in the process. We enjoy it. We're healthier. Not everything, there's still compromises to be made, but it's not all bad. So I agree with you totally. Even though I haven't read your book, so I'll look into them.
And I'll second that. You need to take some time to ride your bicycle and enjoy the environment that you're in, and not worry about everything constantly. You have to know what your limitations are as far as an individual, and work with other people and find common ground and see what you can accomplish from there.
Other final thoughts? Otherwise, I'll say thank you so much for coming and sharing a bit about yourselves and your lives, and tips for those who were here and who might watch this later. So I'm going to stop the recording.